Analyzing Predictive History by Professor Jiang, Part 3. Okay guys, so last time we saw that predicting means saying before. So there again we can deconstruct the meaning. Saying can mean several things, and it can apply to several contents, and before can mean several things too. So first, the pre, meaning before. Before what exactly do we say these things? So you can say something before it happens. It's the minimum for predicting. You can say something first, before others see it, before others narrate it, although it may have happened. You can be the first one to warn of an incoming threat, or the first one to have seen a danger or an opportunity, and attracting the attention of the rest of the people on it. And you can say before it's too late to do anything, especially before it's too late to prevent, interact, or alter the event. So now when we go to the saying, you can say things to express them, to just push out a content that needs to be extracted from your body. The pressure needs to be expelled. That's what expressing means, but with no particular goal of communicating. Then you can say something to communicate and to make a content common. You make an information common so that it could be acted upon communally, or so that each individual can react to it, or can interact with it. And you can say what you see, you can say what you want, you can say what you need, or you can say, for instance, what you're scared of. So when you're predicting, it could be any combination of all these and the many other categories I've not included. So you could say and express the things you're most scared of, and you could say that to others, or you could just express it. You can say what you see, the information you get access to, and you can try to make this information common knowledge and spread them. And you can warn, you can say that you see a danger and try to prevent it, to prepare for it, to make sure people can interact with it. So the instance, the type of example I was giving last time was about someone cleaning his gun, or someone playing with a gun and pointing it in a direction. And there you could have many types of actions. One would be to warn the person that it's dangerous, that he might hurt someone, that he might shoot someone, so that you expect him to change, to lower the gun or something. You can do the same and tell it to the person around the threat, so that they can take their own responsibility and move aside, get out of a line of sight. You can aim for a mix of both. You can also warn and act or interact. like move yourself away and move the canon. The actual saying is part of an emission. It's the beginning of an action. So there are all these things that saying can be. It can be the saying of things that you have seen or foreseen. You went into the future somehow and got back with knowledge. But now the actual meaning and the actual utility of what you express and what you say is the same or as contradictory as any other type of communication. You can predict something to manipulate someone else. I can push decisions or push some types of internal psychological reactions. So once again, the prediction can apply to, as the prediction itself as a pathos component, content of feeling, passion, what affects someone, an affect. It can have a logos component, logic, arguments, narrative, and so on. It can have an ethos component, meaning a moral and ethic way of relating to others, and entanglement into a network of relationships, a belonging, a perceived validity that's given not by the content but given by the person expressing it, the charisma of the person, or the status, for instance. And so you have these three aspects for a prediction, for instance, but you will have, they can be addressed to three aspects of the recipient, of the people who will receive these predictions, who will hear them. So there again, you can try to elicit an affect, a reaction, emotional reaction, a passion, quite often fear. You can elicit fear in people by predicting dire things, or you could elicit anticipation by predicting good things. You can target or aim at their reason, their logos, their mind. You try to change the way they think. You try to change the content that they use to create the models, like what I mentioned last time, the big cauldron of memories that are woven together to create the world and the potentialities of action, to create the being, the becoming, or the changing the actions and the perception or understanding of the world. And you can aim at the ethos. You can aim at the moral fiber. You can aim at the internal codes, the ethics, and more broadly the set of values that are commonly shared into one social network. So the problem with predictions is the ill definition of the goals, of the means, and eventually of the targets. The criticisms that can be pointed at Jiang would be, for instance, that is predicting very dire things in front of the classroom where there's a deep asymmetry of status, of logos, ability, and amount of knowledge coming from age, education, whatnot. So So status one is the teacher, the other ones are the listeners. And intensity, like pathos once again. So what makes the lessons of Professor Jiang like interesting and grasping the mind, grasping the attention, is the intent, the affect that he puts into it. You can see the passion he has for teaching. Obviously, when you're a pupil in a high school, there's a very big gap between this thriving passion and this striving for conveying a content and the reception, which is quite often the classes are compulsory. It's not really a choice, and so there's an asymmetry into the relationship. And Professor Jiang is trying to empower people, but at the same time the sheer force of the push can crush their own burgeoning perceptions of the world. So it's pretty much the same thing you would experience in martial arts or anything. If you have decades of experience and the art you practice, the craft you practice, for you what it means is pretty much infinite. You can transfer all your life, all the meaning of life, all the depth of spirituality, of anything into this practice, because you've delved into it so deep. And now you see a beginner, and you know that the depth of thing that he could get out of it is just immense, and you drown him into content. So on some aspect, although the actual rendering of the lessons and of the arguments tends to be very clear, and Professor Jiang always asks people to give questions, you can see also that the sheer amount of content and the nature of the content, it's content coming from maturity. So I'm pretty much the same age as Professor Jiang. It's content that's mixed disillusionment, bitterness, that has been transmuted through discovery of deeper meaning, discovery of love, discovery of type of faith, consciousness, whatnot. So it's the songs of experience and the songs of innocence meeting. But this is a bit of a danger. It's not a bit. It's a bit of a danger due to the fact that when you train many people in whatever domain, you discover that it doesn't work like this. You cannot transmute. It's not supposed to work like this. If you want people to get any involvement into their lives, they need to carry some type of maybe not illusions, but some type of intent that goes with youth. So this is the deep stuff you find in all the old ways of teaching, for instance, as displayed in the Coyote's Guide to Nature Connection and Mentoring by Jiang, Elena, and others, where you have all these archetypal times of the day and directions that relate to ages also, but would relate to different energies and different contents. So obviously you cannot do that in a normal teaching in class. So it can still be understood by there's a validity into the criticism of certain type of teachers towards Jiang Juixin classes, in that quite a few would recognize the feat of catching the interest of the pupils, but quite a few would criticize the fact that the content is imposed upon them. It's not content that they will co-create, for instance. It's not mentoring. It's the transmission of, on one way of seeing it, the first layer of what you see when you see Jiang Juixin's class is the transmission of experience to innocence, with the goal of arming innocence so that it will not be completely lost and destroyed and disillusioned. So it's the attempt of one that has felt his own innocence shattered or raped, and it's the attempt to prevent that in others by arming them, by providing them with sufficient internal weaponry and armors, so that they can face whatever with a more experienced or more prepared eye. But what others will say is that it is maybe too much. It may destroy these kids. Most likely it's one of two choices. Society collapses entirely, and this content will most likely be nearly useless, except if we go to a second layer, which we'll do later, or the society does not collapse directly, but they will still have for a while to live and adapt in this type of world, and they'll still need to maintain relationships with their families, they'll still need to maintain relationships with their friends, and most of the time with their societies, except if they go for like my type of solutions at the time. You leave everything, you go walking wherever in the jungle and whatnot, but even that is not accessible from China. It's difficult to hitchhike in China. It's illegal to camp in the wild. It can be done, but only if you have sufficient experience not to be seen. And so arming them for something, but at the same time making them misfits for what actually exists now, is a complexity. And it's a complexity that I deeply appreciate, because I've had the same problem with all the children of friends that I was the traveling uncle to. And there again, there's no answer. You see things unfolding, you see the speed at which they go, and you know it won't be long. You know that these children will not have the long decades that we had to go through all the different phases of losing any sort of trust into society, and then rebuilding trust into oneself, into community, into human values, into nature, and so on. They will not have this time. Most likely seeing the way media coverage goes, it will go from no awareness at all of what's happening, the scarcity of resources incoming, what it means to reduce by 20 or 25% the amount of fossil fuel in a society that's entirely based on fossil fuel, and what happens when you cut that, or when the prices are constantly going up, what it means to lose half of your artificial fertilizer when you've not encouraged at all or not supported alternatives like permaculture, regenerative agriculture, and so on. So you're entirely reliant on techniques. You're entirely reliant on tools, on externalities. So you need absolutely your cane to walk, for instance. But your cane, half of it will be taken away from you. And for instance, once you know things like this, you want to transmit. You want to transmit information so that people prepare that. Unfortunately, it must be said that it doesn't really work much. It's good to have foreknowledge or knowledge of how things work, though. So I'll stop there. I'll go to the second layer. So behind the content, which may be toxic for some children, or even for some people, even like foods can be toxic by the quantity, too much food, too little food, or by the quantity, by the quality, too refined food, or foods that are too strong for the ability of a digestive system to treat them, or foods that are polluted, that are contaminated, that are of too little value, too little quality. And you can have the pertinence aspect. Something is appropriated to the situation or not. At that time, that season, that context, this food is helpful or not, or toxic. So they're the same. In one-on-one, you can feel that with people, and you can feel the reaction and adapt to it. But in a classroom, it's not that it's very difficult. Most likely, Professor Jiang can feel it somehow, as any good teacher, but you cannot do much. And then also, it can revert to the goo of official learning for history and whatnot, content it's a collection of facts that add up to nearly nothing, or oftentimes are just a depiction of how the wonderful present of the society you live in came to be. So it's basically not very different from propaganda. If your teacher believes other things, then the propaganda will go in other directions and present maybe more diversity of view, but it's the same idea. But here you can see also that one of the main things that Professor Jiang pushes for is not the content. He doesn't care much about the facts of history of the past. And in old courses, when maybe the intent was clearer, he doesn't really care much about predictions either. The predictions are just a tool to better a system of understanding of the world. And in many old classes, you see also that what is conveyed through the lesson is not actually a content and not this crushing of all hopes and whatnot. It's more the attempt to convey a way of using the mind, a way of using information to appropriate it and deliver a content that is deeply personal. But while being deeply personal, it's also deeply, it's unique, because it's information digested by one's unique treasure. So in that, if you become a role model for that, you can hope to see this type of thing happening in the children or in the pupils of whatever age. And you can see that it does work somewhat. On the internet it may be more complex. Some people may grab the content, especially if you watch just one or two. You get content, you get this amount of information that if you've never been exposed to any collapse approach, any big geopolitical or environmental work, then you may feel very depressed afterwards, and maybe you may miss the deep content, or at least the second layer of content, because the second layer of content is this empowerment in the use of thinking. It's not targeted directly at thinking the way the work of someone like Edward de Bono would go, but it's thinking applied to a specific domain. And in this way of using thinking to create a narrative of a world that allow you to navigate the world, the main contents would be fairly simple. You have this idea of overlapping layers. So there's this layered perception of reality. You have many lenses or many filters that make appear certain types of information on the infinity of the field of information that's available, and you can overlap them. So it's basic GIS, geographical information systems practices. That's the common practices you would do in permaculture, for instance, where you take a transparency of water, fire, earth, of buildings, of roads, of borders, and so on, and you overlap them to get informations and to direct your actions. You do not put everything, all the potential filters would just cover everything. You have many filters with different meshes, different natures of blocking or allowing things through, and if you put all of them together at the same time, you just block all incoming input and all exit. So that's not the way to do it. You understand the idea, you see that you have these many contents that you can compare, and then you can overlap them and see how they act together. So the 3 layers that he uses are just one instance of a more broader method. The other one that he doesn't describe much, but that he does use, is the scaling approach. Zooming in, zooming out. You go to what happens at the individual level, so where the eschaton would be the personal goals, where the game theory looks at the incentives, personal incentives, whatnot. You go to families, communities, you could go to lineages, clans, then you go to communities, to societies, you go to whatever scale of society, whatever scale of organization, in space and time, until you reach like the biggest of the time, like nation states turning into transnational organization and turning into say things like transnational capital or collections of interests that are common. So the third layer that I wanted to address, that you see oftentimes when you go deeper into the content is trying to convey, is the exact opposite of what you would see when you get to the beginning content. What is conveyed is actually an attempt to make people, especially younger pupils, aware of the importance of responsibility, developing an ability to respond, to answer to questions through awareness, through questioning, through perception, through consciousness, answering or responding to situations by developing attributes, developing skills, capacities, competency, and the ability to respond for one's actions by developing authority, by developing accountability, and so on. So basically it's depicting, it's pushing children and adults to become players in the big game. And players enjoy the game. If you play a role-playing game, or you play in the theater, you play whatever role, what you will play will be an adventure, something that happens to you. And what is an adventure? Basically, it's a normal situation where everything goes well, or everything is normal, and then it's disrupted and it turns to hell. And from there it goes wherever. It goes all the way down, rags to riches, goes from down up, or anything like that. But when you're playing, the actual difficulty of the situation is the fun of the game. So if you take life, especially what's coming, but everyday life, whatever happens around, is always a game, and it's always very complicated. You get bored to death if you don't know what to do in a society you do not respond to, and you can be starving and whatnot, you can be bombed, and then shit happens, you have to do something or die, because it's always the game. You can always lose. It's part of the game. It's part of the wider game of consciousness and whatnot. So what is trying to convey is actually a deep feeling of agency that is sometimes lost into the intricacies of the actual content. Because when you depict the turning back of the expansion of the definition of self, of the social self, as from one being a member of a family, a lineage, to one being member of a clan, to one being member of say a tribe, then being member of a region, a small kingdom, then a bigger kingdom, an empire, or a nation state, and then a society of nations and a planet, and so on and so forth. When you retract the perception of self, you do not get great results. If things turn back to nationalism, the globalism as it is depicted is a plague, because it's the expansion of one way of thinking, one way of seeing the world, that will erode or destroy or eat all the others. So what they call globalism or mondialism is basically the contamination of a virus. It's not the deep weaving together of diversity to create complex systems that you see in life. But if you go back to, say, the former level that we had, prior to the Second World War, with big egos of nation states identified with religions and whatnot, like ethnicities, any type of definitions, political ideologies. You do not get anything good. You will just get exactly the things you had prior. The situation is much, much worse. The world we have now is woven from the fabric of mondialization, both in its matter, energy, and information. You break it down and you think you can bring back nation states the way they were at the turn of the 20th century. Big dream. Big dream. The big nation states that existed, say, in Europe, the winners of the game, could exist as they were just by colonizing the rest of the world. But you retract, they were expanding the amount of energy they had per capita. If you go the other way around and you're just losing, and you go for, instead of being the industrialized country that is expanding and pushing outwards, now you're the deindustrialized country that is trying to reindustrialize in front of others that have already have their armies and whatnot. And it leads nowhere. So these narratives, to me, they are not really helpful. It's trading. When you describe globalism as a major threat, it's completely true, but nation states are a major threat. Nation states were the globalism of the prior eras, when people had regional languages, had differences into the fiefdoms and whatnot. So that's, the nation state do not exist more than the society of nations of the mondialized world. No more than later, if you go down, it's always the same. It's the same with the individual. Your multiplicity and plurality and diversity of cells, of bacteria, of microbiota, like yeast and whatnot, and at the same time you are a unit interacting with other units. So that's when the content is sidetracked, it may lose the most important content that it carries, which is this stuff you matter. Consciousness is primary. Love, as cheesy as it looks, peace and love is the way, even through amazing times of war and destruction and whatnot. The content of Buddha, Lao Tzu, Jesus would be at one point peace, even at some level Mahomet. So that's it for now.